What's up, everybody? Welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable for the first night of Mental Kombat Mondays, where thinking eventually we get up to every Monday, but we're gonna go every other Monday initially. I'm gonna pick a topic of the favorite atheist, evolutionist, agnostic talking points and issue a challenge in relation to that issue. And a lot of the atheists talk a big game. They run around in comments. They talk trash in side chat. They bash me after debates. They do all these things, but very, very few of them actually have the proverbial C.O. Jones to step up and back up their BS. And this is where this idea came from, really kind of sparked from is, hey, you know what? People can talk trash. That's fine. Tell you what, I'll put some money up and you don't even have to beat me. You just have to have the balls to come and face me and have the conversation and issue an argument. And if you issue the best argument of all of your peers that will also rise to the occasion, then I'm going to Venmo you $50. That's all you got to do. You just got to step up, come forward, put forth a reasonable argument and counterpoint, and get the audience to vote for you. That's it. That's all you got to do. You just got to man up and come do it. So for tonight, we just give you the opportunity to debunk one of my favorite components in relation to intelligent design and ultimately, the necessity of a divine creator. But in this context, we're going to be talking about the genetic code. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to back up the talking points I hear ad nauseum, which is, oh, it's just a metaphor, it's just an analogy. It looks like a code, but it's not really a code. You just think it's that. It's not actually. I argue that it is a literal one and argue that I can support my position. But I want you to come on and make your case. State your case. And here's how it's going to work. So the structure will be, it's going to be 15 minutes per person. You get a 5-minute opening statement to present your case. Then I will cross-examine you for 7 minutes. And then you have 3 minutes uninterrupted to make your closing position. If you want to address any things you think that were your strongest points during cross-examination or from your initial position, you can do that. And then from there, we will move on to the next individual, assuming more than one steps up. And then at the end, I will post a link in chat for everybody to go to a Google form, and you will select which individual you think won. And then when this is all over, obviously, in private chat, you'll tell me what your Venmo is. And if you're the winner, I will Venmo you $50. So I'm interested to see if there are any individuals in the challenge, or in the side chat, that want to accept the challenge. So I'm going to post a link here. And here as a sidebar, folks, for those who don't know, I actually ran an ad campaign for this challenge specifically. I actually spent money advertising on atheist channels for them to come and defeat me and to come step up. So I'm interested to see if all these idiots who talk a mad game and don't actually do it, they don't back up their talking points. I even advertise to them. I spend money to advertise to get them to come accept. So let's see if anybody rises to the occasion. Now, link for anybody who wants to join to take the challenge is in the chat. Feel free to come on in and rise to the occasion. I know that Salvador Cordova is wanting to play devil's advocate. He's just itching to do so. Let's see who we got. Is Tony coming in? Who's Tony? Tony, what's up, man? Are you sleeping?
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll see if any. I have to see if any atheists will show up and accept the challenge. I don't know. I was hoping that some of them would would email me, hit me up on Twitter, comment, but I had a bunch of comments about how I don't know what I'm talking about, what I'm saying is false. I'm making things up. I've heard a bunch of that, but nobody officially accepted the challenge.
I
So,
tried to get a few people. Tony Reed, I invited him in, but he's not coming.
I mean, Speed of Pudding was in a little while ago, and
Yeah.
talking about how they're going to put up Immutable Destiny.
Yeah.
Which is funny. And I don't know why, Speed of Pudding won't accept the challenge. Oh, wait, because in my debate with Speed of Pudding, he conceded that it was code. So he can't really come in, even though
Yeah.
he talks mad trash. So I think it's kind of funny. It's like, man, he's going to go send his little minion buddy in, but he won't come himself. It's funny. They always claim to be debunking our positions, but can't actually debunk them, which is pretty funny. So anyway, folks, while we're waiting for waiting to see if anybody will actually rise to the occasion, after my stream, I know that we shall head over to Standing for Truth channel because he and George and Matt, I believe, are going to be debunking Gutsick Gibbon and her favorite talking point of radiometric dating. And she issued a counterpoint to their the live stream they had with Dr. McQueen a couple days ago, and it's interesting. But while we're waiting, again, atheists, come on, evolutionary activists, come on, come rise to the occasion, step up. Where is your confidence? You always claim that I don't know what I'm talking about. You always claim that I'm making things up, that nobody actually thinks what I claim. And I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for you guys to rise to the occasion, to have some of the backbone and the confidence and the knowledge to be ready to have the assertions that I make completely annihilated, which you claim is what will happen if I will ever just debate somebody on the topic. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm here. I'm waiting. Where are you? There's money on the line, folks. I'm literally going to give you don't even have to beat me. You just have to put up a better argument than another atheist. That's all you got to do. 2 of y'all have to show up. That's it. Come on, folks. But back to SFT and George, they're going to be, like I said, they're going to be diving into even more detail and basically annihilating Erica's supposed talking point counter, which didn't actually counter anything. It's but we'll see. But for fun, folks, while we're waiting, just I always enjoy this little clip when it comes down to the discussion of whether or not the genetic code actually is a code. And if this guy thinks it is, I'm not really sure why these new atheists on YouTube want to run around and claim that it's just metaphor or analogy.
The biggest scientific breakthrough of the 20th century, well, in physics, there have been several. Einstein's special and general theories of relativity, and the whole complex of advances which come under the heading of quantum mechanics. I'm not enough of a physicist to explain them or judge them, but I'm persuaded that they are of immense importance. In biology, I suppose it would have to be the double helix, the Watson and Crick discovery of the structure of DNA, which was far more than just the discovery, the crystallographic work, discovering the structure of a big molecule. Because what that led up to was a major revolution in which much of biology became a sort of branch of information technology. The consequence of the Watson-Crick discovery, with all that it led on to, the DNA code and the sort of various genome projects that are going on now, is that genes, which from my point of view are absolutely central to biology, genes are information. They are coded information. It even looks like computer information. I mean, a chromosome is a great long computer tape. It's linear, it runs one-dimensional digital code. It's not binary, it's quaternary, but apart from that, it's just the same as computer tape. It's read in sequence. It's copied and pasted from one part of the organism to another in just the same way as a computer programmer would copy and paste. So biology has turned into computer science, and the sort of mystification of biology, which was still possible when people could talk about a life force, a vital fluid, things like that, essentially skyhook explanations, that's completely out. You can never hear anybody talking nonsense like that anymore. And it's all, I won't say it's all due to Watson and Crick, but it was Watson and Crick that really finally torpedoed that kind of thinking in biology. So I suppose as a biologist, I have to set the great physical discoveries on one side, important as they are, because they're not my field. In my own field, I think I'd have to say Watson and Crick 1953 is the greatest breakthrough in 20th century science.
And obviously, for anybody who just listened to that and knows the significance of those words coming out of Richard Dawkins' mouth, I find it rather fascinating that he literally uses every aspect of it's digital. It's like computer copy paste. It's literal. I don't know how many more points have to be covered than to address all of this. But Otangelo, welcome to the stream, my friend. How are you doing?
Yes, hello. Good night, John. Fine, thanks, and you?
I'll hang it in there. I know you've this is one of your favorite topics as well. And let's see, sharing your screen.
Yeah, let's play that. I think that was quite fun yesterday.
With the no physical interaction, we already discussed it very well.
Yeah, the thing is, this idea of what an interaction is constitutes breaking and making of covalent bonds.
So, in fact, again, back to the amino acid synthetase, that's what it is. So, amino acid synthetase interacts with the correct amino acid and interacts with the correct tRNA. So, you don't need, what does it mean, physical interaction? You just put the correct amino acid to the correct tRNA. That's it. It's all based on a physical, chemical, enzyme activity.
Yeah.
It is very well known. It's
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say, there isn't any relevant professional that's going to deny this. It's just people with a very, very basic, very, very surface level understanding of the subject that then think that they have the intellectual prowess to go up against actual professionals who are looking at them and saying, no, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. This is what it means. And then they just refuse to be corrected because that's the nature of creationism.
So Otangelo says that there is no interaction between anticodons and tRNA, amino acid, binding point.
Somebody's got an echo. Michael, I'm going to have to talk with you. Isn't this Saturday Night at the Atheist? Not Saturday
Night
but show?
I know, I made a mistake.
What did you say? Not Saturday Night Shit Show.
Oh, by the way, Otangelo, I muted you until you could figure out your echo thing, but you're good to unmute yourself.
Okay, guys, if you were to say that, if I took a broom and I hit this raccoon out here on the fence, you could say there's no physical interaction.
Well,
in the same way that you could say that tRNA there's no physical interaction.
It's more akin to saying that there's no physical interaction between gluons and quarks to bind them together to make a proton. Oh. It's just fucking wrong, and no physicist would actually say that.
Well, but also wait, never mind, I'm confused. Go ahead.
It's not surprising.
Well, by that logic, there's no physical interaction between the electrons orbiting a nucleus and the nucleus to make a freaking atom. Yeah, and there definitely is. It's the exchange of a photon, virtual photon.
Okay, let's explain one more time. Physical molecular tRNA, which have an L shape like this. So it's like that, L shape. From one side of this tRNA, you have anticodon. From the other side, you have amino acid acceptor R. You have enzyme which interacts with both with the anti-codon recognize and the acceptor R. So in this interaction, the correct amino acid is positioned to the correct tRNA which have the correct anti-codon. From that point, the link is done. The amino acid synthetase go away, and the tRNA is already linked with the correct amino acid to the correct anti-codon.
Angela, let's pause there.
And next step is just recognition.
Demeter continues to, and all of these idiots on Speed of Pudding's channel, they all act like A, we don't understand the process, and B, that somehow because the adapter mechanism exists, that somehow negates the significance of the process from a, well, chicken and egg problem perspective, as well as the evidence in favor of intelligent agency. I mean, it's like it goes over their heads, and like, so what? Like yes, I understand the tRNA interacts, but the codon is not chemically interacting with the amino acid. That's
correct.
You
that's the point.
Like he's talking about the anti-codon and the amino acid, and it's like it has nothing to do with the codon, like in terms of whether or not there has to be a translation mechanism and an adapter in context of the decryption of the information. Like, this is not exactly it's not a disputed premise. I mean, there's papers on this exact topic. The guy to dive into this in great detail.
Well, this started actually with my debate with Leo, and then at that stream, Leo denied that there is actually a real code, but that it is synonymous, that it is a metaphor. Exactly the talking point of your stream tonight. And then Dimitar actually confirmed what I said. And there is, of course, there is no doubt he's a professional and he knows that there is a literal assignment of codons to the amino acids. I mean, that's what the genetic code is about, the assignment of 61 codons and 3 stop and start signs to 20 amino acids. So there's absolutely no doubt. And he confirmed it, and I made basically my case. So I think this is a clear issue. And then the next point, which I said was, well, if it is actually a real code or a cipher, an assignment, then the next question is, how was that assignment done? And that is the crux of the issue. And Dimitar, he sent me a paper which he wrote trying to solve that riddle. And you got a reply from me too. And of course, this what he tries to claim, that is completely, I don't think that it answers the riddle or the problem at all. I mean, no scientist has solved that problem. And for us, it is very clear that assignment of meaning, that comes always from intelligence, period. That is very clear to us. And they, of course, they try to deny that by all costs, because as soon as you admit it, that there must be an intelligence to make that assignment, they lost their case of materialism and atheism. No scientists have solved that.
Very true. Very, very, very true. Salvador, welcome, my friend. How are you? And by the way, everybody, if you missed it last night, Sal did a simulcast. We did an epic part 3 of protein probabilities over on Standing for Truth's channel. Very awesome. And this actually last night was probably one of Sal's best lectures he's done, at least so far, at least this year, I think. And it was very intriguing. And all I gotta say is, when you get into the reality that the ribosome is both a 3D printer and a sewing machine, yeah, that just, I'm just saying, got kind of put things in place that make you have to suspend all rational thought to come to the conclusion that somehow that came into existence by undirected process. But I think tonight, Sal, and by the way, Sal's been like growing out a little bit of stubble. I think right now he's wanting to play the bad guy, and he wants to come in and play devil's advocate tonight. I think, is that what you're saying? Because the atheist won't rise to the occasion. Is Sal coming in and going to rekindle his days of yore?
First off, I'll just say that I'm batting for you. I want if I win this prize, I'm going to refuse it because I don't want the money to go to the atheists. So we can go hang out in Tunica, Biloxi, or Vicksburg sometime when.
Are those casinos or locations of casinos you're not banned from?
They're where I'm banned from. In fact, I might be arrested if I go to Hollywood for trespassing. So they might put me in jail for a day. So anyway, I'm actually not going to be playing total devil's advocate. And my beard, man, I'm not ever going to compete with what you got, bro. You demand.
Well, my I decided to. I mean, I've had a beard for a while, but back in July, I decided to start growing it out again. And I tell you what, for those, well, ladies, you really won't have the ability to appreciate this. Guys who can't grow a real beard, you won't also have the ability to appreciate this. But once you have grown one that's significant, and you experience your first winter, and you get out of your vehicle, walk out of your house, and a bitter wind strikes you, and you don't feel it. You feel pressure on your face, but not the biting cold. It's a very profound moment of just like, huh. So this is why the Vikings grew those ridiculous beards. It had nothing to do with, significance and whatnot. It had everything to do with literal survival of not freezing to death. But so Salvador is gonna play a quasi enemy. So Sal, you have 5 minutes for your opening position as to why the genetic code is not a code. And then I will cross-examine for 7 minutes, and you get 3 minutes to close.
Sounds good. We'll start.
All right, hang on. Let me get. Whenever you start talking, I will start the clock.
I personally believe that there is a genetic code. The problem is establishing it in debates. So for this reason, you've heard me argue origin of life and abiogenesis and evolution against it from the structural biology perspective, and I've encouraged that. There was a big meeting, private meeting of many of the top ID proponents, and I was there. Half the room were IT people, the other half were molecular biologists, biochemists. And so the divide basically ran along the hardware side, which is the molecular biologists and chemists, versus the IT types, which were the software information types. Even though my background is in information theory, at least partially, I was an electrical engineer, I sided with the hardware types. So one of the problems in establishing a code, whether it actually exists, is the best way to unequivocally establish it is if we talk to the designer of the hardware and he tells us, yes, that's a code. That's how we can unequivocally establish it. The problem with establishing something as a code in terms of information theoretic constructs is that information is not measurable like physical things, like say mass or length or time. We actually have National Institutes of Standards to measure these things. We can actually say this exists, this is how much there is. We can't do the same with information or by way of extension, things like code. For information, if I took a file, say a JPEG file, and asked how much information is there, we would have a very large disagreement as to what's actually there, because the Shannon information is different from the lossy decompressed information. And so there's been kind of a debate in the ID community, and I've actually been advocating against using information metaphors to argue your argument, to make the probability argument. You can make the argument by way of metaphor, and you can be modestly successful, but to make the rigorous case, it has to be argued on hardware. So I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just, it's probably not the best argument. And so I would just say that we could say, just as a matter of policy, not that it's my personal view, but as a matter of policy, that we should say the question is indeterminate at this time, even though the evidence strongly indicates that, because we can say that codons generate these particular amino acids through the process of transcription and translation. So that's kind of the angle I'm coming from. I think one of the things I experienced when we were trying to establish codes in information theory, I was actually a potential graduate student of William Dembski, who advocated complex specified information and specified complexity. That's no longer used by ID proponents. The more successful arguments have been of the hardware variety, hard chemistry, in terms of expectation values and expected chemical outcomes. These things are measurable in the way that cannot be disputed by third parties, meaning like if we have a chemical substance, even an atheist will agree that that's what you have, and an ID proponent will agree to it. With respect to information, even though maybe in their own mind they know it's there, they'll put a public face and deny it because they don't want to give an inch. And I don't want to. That's why I don't want to put the argument and frame it in terms of information and theory and code. Even though, as you showed with the Dawkins video, when they're given kind of a moment where they're speaking freely and not trying to defend their atheistic position, they'll call it a code. So yes, it is indefensible on some level, except for the fact that you'll use sophistry. So that's my point. That there is a difference between information and physical things. There's a divide between hardware and software. When we go into the software and information realm, it becomes very difficult to establish what is scientifically true because it is somewhat observer dependent. And for that reason, when we argue codes, they will use the thing that it's a metaphor, even though I would personally say it is the correct metaphor. It's just I don't go there. So even when I talk to my software guys, I argue hardware. So that's all I had to say. And thank you for the promo of my protein probabilities.
Of course. Well, Salvador, while I understand the position you're taking, I think that you may be approaching this from a short-term perspective. So, because I agree with you, and you may have noticed that I have been, since you and I started interacting more, I have actually been incorporating the elements of the physical and the structural biology into my arguments as a both separate and coinciding support mechanism, a standalone and a support mechanism for the information theory and the coding component, because I think, and you kind of alluded to this with Dawkins, but the point I'm making and the reason that I am so willing to make this argument, I don't think it's smart to not address it and not go down this rabbit hole, is that it is so well established in the secular academic literature that all of these things are true in relation to information theory, coding theory, semantics, syntax, all those things. I mean, it's well documented in the literature that the reality is the only people denying that and putting on that face that you're referring to are the YouTube atheists who are actually ignorant of reality. And so kind of case in point, and I'll get your opinion on this, because you used the word metaphor, and you even said that it was metaphor. So my first counter cross-examination question would be, you claim it's metaphor and not literal. So I would appreciate if you would debunk Hubert Yockey, who, as I'm sure I know you know who he is, and he's a rather he's passed away now, but he's one of a significant members in the arena of information theory and this whole topic. And from his book from 2005, Information, Transcription, Translation, Code, Redundancy, Synonymous, Messenger, Editing, and Proofreading are all appropriate terms in biology. They take their meaning from information theory and are not synonyms, metaphors, or analogy. So Sal, I don't know how much more direct your point can be debunked than by some guy who literally wrote the book on this topic, stating that calling them synonyms, metaphors, and analogies is not actually, I mean, it can be done in certain aspects, but to claim that they are not, or that it is nothing but those, is a false position. So what would you have to say to that?
Man, you're good. This is tough. So I think you just landed one there. I have Hubert Yaki's book, and I actually had read it, and I did not find it very, even as a sympathetic ID proponent, I didn't find it as persuasive as the hardware argument. So when he's saying that it's literally these things, there we have, again, the problem is if we have people that would disagree with it, it's like, again, it's in the eye of the beholder. We have no means of actually measuring these things. That it's right or wrong. What I mean in terms of measurement, we can measure something in terms of mass. There's not going to be any disagreement among physical scientists except maybe the precision of your measuring instruments. But it's very difficult to measure how well a metaphor applies. Now, I think there are other metaphors we could say. It's like, well, it's the genetic code of motor. It's the wrong metaphor. So we could say some metaphors definitely are more appropriate. I wouldn't say, when we look at the transcription translation system, those are the correct metaphors. We wouldn't call it a transportation device, for example, even though there is some transport. So actually, there was a very good book by Mike Jean that echoed Yaki's sympathies. Mike Jean believes in universal common ancestry. He was an ex-creationist, but he still believes in intelligent design. And he was struck by the appropriateness of certain metaphors, or even descriptive, certain descriptions. So I'm agreeing halfway with your point that I personally would accept it. But as someone who does mathematics, and physics, I could not, from that standpoint, if a physical scientist said, demonstrate this in terms of physics or chemistry, I could not do that. And that's why I would feel uncomfortable.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, hang on then. So you keep relying on this physical aspect. I think perhaps that you have become so confident in the structural and the physical argument that you may be missing a additional component. So are you suggesting that a physicist could not clearly denote the semantic and syntactic meaning of the information contained in Braille?
I would say yes, because again, there's this. We have, even in the IT industry, we have a divide between hardware and software, and so the physicists and chemists are hardware guys. Now, the thing is, we need the hardware guys to make information systems. We wouldn't have information systems. So I'm not saying that we're in opposition to each other. I'm just saying, in terms of if we're going to talk information, what makes it possible is the hardware.
Well, I understand that, but you still have to have, just because you have hardware, you still are required to have the syntax and the semantic meaning that can be translated through the hardware. So now obviously the hardware is not conscious, but it still has to have had the quote unquote meaning of the information that's being processed,
right?
Preset in terms of its interpretation capacity, correct?
Yes. And then the designers do that. So with regard,
So extension point. With what is now being done in computer science, using DNA as the storage mechanism for human information.
Yes.
I don't really understand how your position is valid in terms of not being your position. I don't understand how your position invalidates the path that I'm going down in this particular context.
Right.
Where I'm going with this, you're talking about how could you interpret, right?
Right.
Well, if we're being able to store data using the exact same mechanism in a clearly interpretable way and a measurable way, then I don't understand how your argument is valid in saying you don't know how you could interpret the quote unquote natural genetic information. If we can interpret and we can measure human information, how can you claim that we can't do the same with the genetic?
The distinction, and that's a very good objection. The distinction is with the human designers, we're in touch with the designers. They can tell us, yes, we designed this code, which they could say they're equivalent of ASCII. And so that when Craig Ventnor is putting these watermarks inside his artificial life, or people are putting songs, MP3 songs in DNA, we can actually talk to the designers is that, yes, definitely this is code. We don't have that same thing available to us to talk to God and say, Lord, is this a code? That's
but since when has the necessity to interpret a code required speaking with the author? For case in point, World War II, I believe it was the Navajo that were used, I say used the wrong word, that took part in cracking many of the Nazi codes. And I don't think that those individuals were in communication with the original authors or the originators of the code book that was being used on the German side of the equation. So are you arguing then that because they never interacted directly with the authors, that what they interpreted and what they cracked was not code?
They interacted indirectly in that they knew these guys were trying to conceal their communications. So they knew
the intent to encode, except the attempt to conceal, has nothing to do with whether or not something can be derived as and fulfills all of the requirements for constituting a code, though.
I think it's helpful because I've actually tried to do communications where we would try to disguise things as white noise so that it couldn't be even seen as a code. So again, with the you were mentioning,
but you're creating in that context, you were creating ciphers, though.
Yeah. The idea was to make ciphers that are a little bit hard. They wouldn't even know that there was information being transmitted. Actually, if you hear a modem signal, the old modems, it would sound like white noise. It has
but here's the question, though. So just because that's something that can be done, how does that negate? If you come across one that's extraordinarily obvious, how does that negate, just because you can interpret something through experimentation and derive the meaning, how does that negate the fundamental recognition that it is exactly what it appears to be?
Well, I think we're over our time limit for interrogation.
No, continue. Come on, let's keep going. I'm having fun now.
All right, we're having fun. Okay, guys, I want you to vote for me. Just you guys in the chat. We're gonna save John Maddox.
At this point, we have to have. At this point, so actually, Sal is just giving these the atheists potential ammunition for this. Although I gotta say, Sal, right now I'm still beating you. Okay, so back to the point. So how just because are you actually claiming that if you came across a piece of paper with a encryption code on it, and you were able, through your intellect, you were able to determine the meaning, are you arguing that even though you do not know who authored the paper, if you were able to ultimately determine its intent or its meaning and its code structure and everything else, and the encode decode model, if you determined that, are you claiming that because you never met the author that it is not a code?
No, I'm not claiming that. I'm just claiming that we can't establish it like we would in terms of physics and chemistry. And so I'm absolutely convinced that the genetic code exists. But it's one thing to be able to, we're talking about the arena where we have to defend our arguments, and I'm just not successful. Once I've thrown information theory, I did this a long time ago, and that's why I gave up on it. I said, once I've thrown that and I cited Yaki, the argument would just blow up, like what we've been seeing with your arguments with the atheists. They're just saying it's all matter for. So to your direct question, it's like, I personally wouldn't deny it. I just couldn't, ironically, I would have a hard time dealing with these sophists because I'm a nice guy, and you just won't take their crap. So you're probably you're better oriented to argue and just kind of beat them down and, point out.
And here's why I say this, because this is I'm currently looking at alivenature.com, which I think everybody recognizes as a rather well-established entity, right? And the digital code of DNA goes into great detail. It's not being an analogy or a metaphor. It's cited 154 times. It's well established, and it goes into great detail about this. That's just one example. There's innumerable other ones, but one of my favorites, which is this one right here, and it's so ironic that the literal title of the paper, which goes into great detail, is More Than Metaphor. Genomes are objective sign systems. So I don't really know how much more direct you have to get in directly contradicting a standard talking point and a ongoing attempt by, and this again directly in context of the YouTube atheists,
Right.
of like, you can continue to make these ongoing arguments and claims and supposed debunkings and things of that nature, but you're literally ignorant. Like, and just because you are ignorant does not mean that the direct opposite of your position is not true, or is true. Sorry. Then you get into, and here's where you were making earlier about ciphers, right? So would you, before I show you this, my next position,
can I just?
Yes, sorry, your turn. Go ahead.
I personally know David Abel. He and I had lunch together. We're basically on the same side. What I am pointing out is basically the divide that happened in this conference, an ID conference that was not advertised among the ID leaders. And you would recognize the names if I told you. This was 4 years ago. And it was the divide between the IT types and the hardware guys. And even though I come from an IT background, I joined the hardware guys in saying, yeah, this is not the way to prosecute the argument. So I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just that I could not. I feel like it's more to say that I feel I would be more successful arguing the hardware side than the software side. So I'm not.
And what I would say is potentially in the academic arena, I could definitely see your position being correct or more advantageous in the.
And that's all it is. I'm not saying that it's.
I know. I'm saying I would potentially agree with you on that one. Of if the debate is occurring with a PhD or a researcher of any kind, really, that going down the structural logic path might be more advantageous in convincing them. I think in relation to the average person, that the information theory and the coding and the programming aspect is more understandable for the layman. And this also correlates with the point I was making, made in joking, but also in very serious manner of, with the explosion of things such as 3D printing.
Yeah.
3D printing was, it's been around for a while, but 3D printing, I'm a relatively early adopter and been heavily involved in tech. So I was following some of the explosion, 2010 on Kickstarter, and, the 3D printers were starting to become more, known. And now 3D printing is becoming commonplace, especially with people under the age of 30. Like 3D printing is second nature. Like people are doing this all the time, right? They're doing it in high school. And so to me, when you really start to think about things like for example, with 3D scaffolding and such, and using, G code for actually controlling a 3D printer and such, and you're having to put in the 3-dimensional logic controls, the element control, the timing control. When you really start to think about what is being expressed in 3D printing code, it is extraordinarily similar to what is happening in genetics in terms of mRNA expression.
Yes.
And that's why, to me, and I'll shut up and let you respond, but that's why, to me, when you really start to dive into the papers that are delineating, I'm talking the academic papers that are delineating what I'm talking about now and Otangelo goes into great, he's published some, or not published, he's linked us to some great papers on like the literal 3-dimensional twists that are being executed by the ribosome during the polypeptide chain formation. Like, hang on. So we have time variables, we have element variables, and we have physical movement in order to result in the end protein fold. Yeah. Like, to me, when you really start to contemplate that, and it all being controlled through the translation mechanism of this information, like, you have the ultimate hybrid between your position of, in terms of your support, the one you support the most, in terms of the structural argument, and the fact that, hey, we have a literal hybrid that cannot be ignored. And now you want to, okay, fine. You want to come up with some, hypothetical explanation for the structural. Okay, fine. Now explain the fact that it doesn't work without the information, and vice versa. And that's where my mind goes in terms of what I would like to see accomplished. I yield.
Well, again, I'm on your side of the argument, and it's really just been the effectiveness, the idea that this is information is the correct way to approach it, because that's why we're successful. I actually was tasked early, with my work professionally, to look for codes in the ALUs, and you'll actually see some of that work in the book Contested Bones by Chris Roop and John Sanford. So it is the most successful, because if we're successful applying metaphors, that convinces us that it really is that the metaphor is appropriate. If we throw the wrong metaphor at it, then it's not going to work. There are more metaphors than just codes. I mean, we could probably gin up a whole bunch of things. So I would agree totally that it makes us more effective in doing science by adopting the information metaphors. And that's why, because it's so successful in describing the system and understanding it. And by the way, that's why we have so many electrical engineers now, and information theorists and computer scientists in biology. And the people that I see on research teams are the physicists, information types, mathematicians. The last people you'll ever see are evolutionary biologists. So I totally agree. And that's why it would be convincing to me. However, just like when you saw my debate with Ron Garrett, I didn't want to argue information theory with a guy. It's like, once I started throwing hardware, it's like, oh, I haven't studied that, and it's like, okay, this is where I'm going to win the argument now, because you can't equivocate things anymore. The problem with metaphors is they can be equivocated. So this is not me disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that from my experience, and if I were to teach the next generation of ID proponents, I'm going to say, the information theory is not wrong, but if you want to argue and consistently win without letting the guys become just total sophists, argue hardware. And the way that one thing that showed me that the hardware argument is strong was when Eugene Koonin started basically making the same thing, and he had to appeal to multiverses. I said, okay, you've won the ideas to basically won that argument, because he kind of shot himself in the head at that point when he dealt with kind of the hardware argument. And so that's all I'm saying, that we're on the same page. But I'm just saying that I've never been successful arguing information theory.
Maybe you just need to be
successful as you. I've not been as successful as you.
Maybe you just need to be a bigger jerk like me. And because here's the thing for me though, is, as you know, because I know you've read many of these papers, and by the way, atheist evolutionists, if I will offer this challenge again, and I look forward to you rising to the occasion. I'm not showing all of my weapons, but I have many bullets where it's a utter annihilation of your position that it's metaphor. It is so clearly delineated of things like, well, the undeniable problem is that the genetic code is arbitrary. I mean, and there's literally a paper. You might want to, for you atheists, evolutionists out there, you might want to go use Google, because there's literally a paper titled "The Arbitrariness of the Genetic Code." You might want to go read it, and before you come at me with your stupid talking points, because I will annihilate you. I won't be as I'm nice to Sal because we're having actually good dialogue at a high level on different aspects of like macro view. I will come for you and I will crush you, and it will be no mercy.
I wanted to say I'm not aware of anything in the works for peer review, where someone's going to say this isn't real. There's no code. It's just our imagination. There's no one that's going to be respected if they come out and try to say we have. Actually, there was a move by some evolutionary biologists to drop metaphors, the design metaphors in biology. They said because it's misleading. People are saying don't use the word machine. People get the wrong. And we have some internet advocates that like speed of sound. It's like, no, we shouldn't be using the word machines because it's misleading. Because I remember in his debate with you, he said we shouldn't use that word. I'm just like, why? So I will tell you that it is definitely the mainstream that it is a code and that it's accepted as literal. And I believe it, and it's going to be effective. People that will not want to use design metaphors are not going to be successful in understanding biology. And with pharmaceutical companies competing to figure out biology, the people who are most successful in applying the correct metaphors are going to win. And that's the bottom line. And so in terms of practical sense, in a totally practical, not say philosophical or theological sense, it's literal enough to the people that in terms of the bottom line of their profits and their mission. So it's just as real to them as anything else that they do in their business. The only people that are denying it are the atheists. Unfortunately, I spend too much time with these guys, and I'm not quite the alpha male you are. All right. So I think you just crush them a lot.
I don't know about alpha. I'm just a jerk. It's well established. It's been very well designated by all the modern day debates atheists that I'm just a complete and utter jerk. But
that guy, just to quote him, he said, "You're such a beta," and it's like, yeah, that's me. So
I was talking about Jesse Lee Peterson against Professor Dave. Beta. Yeah, that was
yeah, I think you would definitely crush them because there's not anyone in the mainstream who actually does serious biological research in terms of like what I mean by making advancements in our insights and how biology works that would be trying to write a peer-reviewed paper and say that's just metaphor, stop using it because it's just an illusion. There's no one that's going to say that and be respected.
Well, and I think one of the, and this is something that, some of the things that you've been doing in your presentations recently and showing the additional information that is encoded in the gene sequence and its corollary in the protein in terms of, destination addresses and things of that nature. I'm getting an echo from somebody. I'm hearing myself talk.
It's not me.
Tangela joined us.
Yeah, but I have my.
Let me cut mine then.
The anyway, what was I going to say? When you were showing the spelling. I forget which protein it was now, but you're showing how the lines of information correlated in the fold with the logistics destination addresses. I mean, at this point, you have coded information that is correlating with not only physical shape, but also spatiotemporal recognition signals. And that's taking things to a whole new level of information theory as well as the structural component. Right. And that's why I'm arguing that I think we actually need to be looking at creating the hybrid argument instead of just separating hardware and software and be like, no, we now have proof beyond doubt that there's both. And you, abiogenesis researchers, origin of life, evolutionists, et cetera, you guys now have to defend and explain and prove how You cannot just say it is chemistry and physics. Like, this is that whole position is annihilated. You have to account for spatiotemporal controls from a three-dimensional perspective with a medium that that is being derived from a medium which is containing syntactic and semantic information. Like, expound, go, explain. My argument is that this is indicative of an evidentiary for the requirement of an intelligent agent. Explain how chance and natural selection does this? Really? Anyway, Tangelo, thanks for joining us again, man. Do you have anything?
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
am I off
I just
the hook now? I'm tired of getting beat up, John.
Yes. Thank you, Sal, for. I actually enjoyed our conversation. It was
So,
fun.
guys in the chat, you vote for me. Say so.
You did great, Sal. I loved your role play.
Take care. It's nice seeing you, Tangelo. God bless you all.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so everybody, make sure you go and if you haven't seen it, make sure you see. You check out Sal's 3-part protein probabilities series. Very interesting information. Covers things from a very fundamental level all the way up to, let's say, debunking some standard YouTube atheist talking points. Tangelo, welcome back, man. And everybody's in the chat. Just so you know, we're gonna, since none of the atheists showed up and nobody would accept the challenge, we're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. And I believe that as soon as I wrap up, SFT and George are going to be launching their stream about debunking guts at Gibbon. So, but Angela, welcome back, my friend. Anything you want to add?
I just wanted to add 5 minutes this. Dimitri, yesterday, he acknowledged what is obvious, and that did shut the mouth of those that claim that the genetic code is just metaphorical. Now, the next question is, of course, how did it emerge? How did the assignment occur? And the only alternative to design that they have is some kind of evolutionary mechanism that it gradually evolved. And I think you saw the paper that Dimitri sent to me, and he says basically that there is a prevalence of certain bases which have some affinity one to each other, and that somehow then formed the genetic code. Now, my response to that, and that is what I wanted to tell here in the stream, is that
Tangelo, I think I lost you. Tangelo, you there? Well, I think we lost Otangelo there for a second. Everybody, let me know if I'm not talking and Otangelo still is. Well, it's interesting. I think one of the interesting points about that Otangelo is bringing up is about the affinity argument from Demeter. It's been well established for quite some time, which is why I find it interesting coming from a chemist like him, that the whole affinity argument and the stereochemical argument has been completely destroyed. I mean, it's now recognized that is not actually a probable or a plausible explanation. And if there is some kind of an affinity, then it would override the ability for the arbitrary, non-repetitive pattern formation of the sequences. And since the only way that the protein sequence structures and the genetic code in general can operate is by being arbitrary and non-rigid. I mean, I don't know. It's amazing. Let me see if Otangelo's back. Oh, no, we lost him. Oh, Otangelo, come on back if you get your... let me... the link isn't in. Let me post the link again in the chat. Anyone wants to come back? Anyone wants to join? Link is in the chat now. And let me see here. Oh, since we didn't get any atheists, we will have to have people vote whether it was Sal or me that emerged victorious in making the better argument. All right, let's see here. All right, everybody, go here. Let me know. Was it me or Sal that made the better case? Oh, and Tony's coming back to join us. Tony, what's up, man?
What's up? Yeah, I was just gonna say it's abiogenesis always happens in some environment that we can never show today. We're able to produce a barrage of different molecules and membranes, but yet it's always in some environment or some other universe, and it's just never available to us today, is what I'm hearing.
No, I mean it's.
So not only do we have the information problem, what you and Sal were saying, but then also the environment that we have to place it in, which is just never available.
Bill says that Sal crushed me. No, like I was saying to Sal, I mean, I completely agree with his position that I don't even know if structural is necessarily harder to debunk or if it's just a whole additional barrage of evidence against abiogenesis and in favor of a creator. I mean, while I would actually argue that the information theory coding problem is actually one that has to be solved before the 3D problem has to be accounted for. I don't even know. At this point, it is the essential chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see how, if you really get into any level of understanding of like, wait a minute, this is what's going on. This is what has to happen. I don't know how you can come to any other. If you truly go down the proverbial rabbit holes, do the research, find out for yourself what the requirements are, and you do it from a open-minded perspective, the only rational conclusion is that at a minimum, there is strong evidence that a intelligent agent would be the most plausible and the most probable solution. I mean, obviously, you can always hold to some crazy outlier like, oh, well, it's within the realm of possibility. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I was going through a gate, and there was a little piece of string that was tied. The string went through a hole in the wooden fence and was tied to the latch. And obviously, you pulled the rope towards you or the little, small piece of twine towards you, and it lifted the latch, right? And I was thinking about this in the context of, what we're discussing tonight. And I'm like, okay, could you come up with some probability argument that says, yes, it's somehow possible with an infinite amount of time and an infinite number of universes that somehow that twine could form and the gate and the rope could tie itself around the latch? Probably. Yeah. There's probably some 1 in 10 to the whatever that says, well, it's not impossible. But I don't think there is anybody on this planet that would argue that without an intelligent agent, rope is going to tie itself in a knot around a latch on a piece of wood or through a piece of wood that is on a hinge and then can open and close.
Yeah.
Like nobody would make that argument.
Yeah.
And actually be expected to be taken seriously.
Well, with enough infinite universes, there's going to, somehow be a mechanism.
Oh, Bill asked a really good question. Do you think the researchers really believe abiogenesis or hope abiogenesis is true? I'm going to have to go with the latter. I mean, I'm sure there's some that do, but when they're conceding, and this is what always gets me about the level of ignorance of the average YouTube atheist. I have watched lectures from this year from people currently working at high-level origin of life research labs who are conceding RNA world problems.
Yep.
And no, we haven't solved this. And yeah, one of our major problems is even if we're able to get something to self-replicate, it always ends up shorter, not
Yep.
longer. I mean, if you have a reduction in information every time, even if it's different, that's the whole point, is like, yes, the information can change, like the sequence can change, but it always ends up shorter than the last one. Like it always ends, it's always what happens. It's either the same length or gets shorter. It does not get longer. And ultimately, you have to explain the existence of things like the Titan protein with its 34,000 base pairs. I mean, get out of town. Like,
There's no way.
you guys can't get 30. You can't get 30 to form, to bond. And without without proteins and other enzymes. Like if you don't have those, you can't get them to bond, the nucleotides to bind. And you're claiming that 1,000? The helicase isn't that long. It's 1,000. Oh, well, we don't need all of them. Okay, fine, 500. You can't get more than 20. What's your point? I mean, it's crazy. All right, folks. So I'm going to wrap up here. Everybody needs to head on over to Standing for Truth's channel. I'm putting the link in chat right now. They're going to be annihilating Gutsick Gibbon. So link is in the chat. Also, I posted the link to the voting booth since it didn't come down to atheists and versus me, me versus Sal. Go there, decide who made the better argument, myself or the one and only Salvador Cordova. And I know he was being very nice to me. He probably could have annihilated me in so many different ways. So go and share your opinion on who you think won. And like I said, then bounce over to Standing for Truth for the annihilation of Erica. But I appreciate everybody coming. Thanks. Hope you had a good time. Enjoyed. Sad it didn't turn into a it's kind of a letdown for me. I was really hoping. I actually ran an advertising campaign. I can't believe I spent money to try and give away money to YouTube atheists, and none of them rose to the occasion after all of the trash talking that I've been putting up with. But folks, again, as I like to end with and say, as you consider the different facets of your existence and you look at the evidence and the reasons and the pieces of the puzzle that are available to you, make sure that the conclusions you reach are always logical, plausible, and probable. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great night, and head on over to Standing for Truth.